This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
I'm convinced now that every single podcast I do from now until the end of the year is going to seem like 5 minutes. That is how long WrestleMania weekend was. It was just 1 week ago. May as well have been yesterday. I'm still exhausted. For whatever reason. I do not remember having that same level of fatigue after Mania 39. Maybe I'm just old and cranky. I'm also 10 times busier now than I was last year. But, well, we got some stuff to talk about today. Not the least of which was Retro Raw and Retro NXT. Even those shows flew by. They still sucked. But they didn't seem like 5-hour marathons. Now, before we get into all the good stuff, make sure you all subscribe and like the show for me. We are here on YouTube and Rumble every Monday and Friday for new episodes and new content. Episodes, podcasts, shows. I don't know what you call them. They're interchangeable, I guess. I'll try to blister through this Raw report because, well, it is still 1995 as we're working our way through the timeline. Right before I sat down to watch the show on Friday, I had to pull up an old Steve Austin clip where he was going, boring. Because I needed to set the mood a little bit. And you know, I thought about something while I was watching Raw. Do you realize the show is still only an hour in overall runtime? As horrible as a lot of the shows are, the one constant that I have to keep reminding myself of, just wait until they go to 3 hours. Now, I know that's like, 15 years later that happens? I mean, they don't even go to 2 hours until sometime in like mid-97, right? Maybe it was earlier. I just have to beat that reminder into my head. If, God forbid, I'm still talking about these shows in 15 years, I'm going to look back at this period with fond memories, wishing I were still reviewing Raw from 1995. I mean, we're still not even midway through the year and I'm about to lose my mind. After reviewing that Shawn angle the other week, it just made me realize all the garbage that still lies ahead. And of course, the fallout from all that. 1 week later, now that Sid is a full-fledged heel, I use air quotes around that because in no way, shape, or form did Sid come off like a heel during that altercation with Shawn the other week. Now we're 7 days removed. Sid is now a full-fledged member of the $1 Million Corporation. The reorganized, restructured corporation, as Ted put it. Even though all the current team members are still the same people from what I gathered. Now they're just throwing Sid into the pack, because why not? They need more bodies, apparently. I also liked how he introduced him here as Sid. He went, "I give to you Sid." Not Psycho Sid. Not Sid Vicious. Just Sid. Didn't really stick the landing, if you know what I mean. You know what else didn't stick the landing was the debut of Jean-Pierre Lafitte. He wrestled Duke the Dumpster Droese in his TV debut. They indeed booked a garbage man versus a pirate here on this episode of Raw from 1995. And I very much enjoyed the idea that Jean-Pierre Lafitte was a pirate, billed from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Because when you're in Louisiana, you see a lot of pirates hanging out down south. Vince McMahon suggesting that Pierre's eye patch was for cosmetic purposes. Just like how the pouch he carried around his neck had real gold doubloons in it. Jerry Lawler spent most of his commentary saying that he'd rather be running the Boston Marathon. I'm sure most of the fans were operating under the same wavelength. I like the one singular fan in the lower deck that had the sign that read, "Geek," in big bold font. A lot of time and thought went into that one. The match was long, dull, and hideously uninteresting. The garbage man made a small comeback at the end, went up and missed a diving headbutt. And then Pierre capitalized and pinned him with a senton splash. And the rest of the match was so unmemorable, I didn't even bother writing anything down about it. I just want to point out here, too, Duke the Dumpster lasted longer as a gimmick than Jean-Pierre Lafitte did. Let that sink in for a minute. I will say one good thing about the show. It was worth the watch, if only just to see Mr. Bob Backlund on spring break. This was so beyond ridiculous. But because it's Bob Backlund, it somehow worked. The visual of Backlund on a beach with the sunscreen on his nose, and he's still decked out in the tuxedo. Amazing fucking television. Him standing there trying to preach to the youths about education. The camera guy's constantly trying to get a shot of the hot babes in the swimsuits, and Backlund keeps turning the camera toward him as he's going on and on about God knows what. I did like the pot shots of the Clinton administration. You can tell Vince co-signed that promo in a heartbeat. I can't do it justice. It was astonishingly horrible, but I loved it. No idea what the fuck it had to do with anything on the program, but it was still great. And then it was immediately back to the ring for more dreadfulness. Doink had a match with Ray Raymond that was every bit as horrible as you could possibly imagine. Dink got involved. They did a bunch of silly comedy spots that were not even remotely funny. The crowd sat on their hands in complete silence. Just awful. Doink won with a whoopee cushion. And then we had our first in-your-house card update from Todd Pettingill. Mainly notable for him plugging their Dream Home sweepstakes again. They actually did this. For the inaugural In Your House pay-per-view in 1995, they gave away a dream home in Orlando. And it was the real deal. 3 bedrooms, outdoor pool, right in the middle of a golf course. So pretty much geared to anybody over the age of 70 and or retired. It was surely more noteworthy than their advertised main event for that pay-per-view. A match that I imagine left people quivering in fear when they first heard it. A WWF Championship main event. Diesel defending against Sid Vicious. A match that you had to pay full pay-per-view price for. Dear God in heaven. I cannot wait to fucking review that match. I have no memory of it. I'm sure it was horrible. Good Lord, how could it not be? I mean, if that one didn't get -5 stars in the Observer Awards, must have been a miracle. Well, as we await that incoming calamity, let's talk about the WWF Tag Team Championship match with Yoko and Owen versus Bob Holly and the 1-2-3 Kid. A remarkably much better match than Doink versus Ray Raymond, meaning that it was average at best. At the point they rang the bell to start this, they still had like 20 minutes left in runtime. I was thinking, how long is this match? Did they really let this thing run out the remainder of the show? No. Certainly got a decent amount of time. It was not a bad match. Not really sure if I needed to see them get the heat on Bob Holly for 10 minutes. But like, I mean, even the finish was kind of anticlimactic. After the fans sat there for 10 minutes watching Holly get beat up by the heels, finally, the Kid gets the hot tag and starts to make his comeback, and he's doing all his usual flip dive spots and flashy offense. God, he nearly killed Owen with that springboard senton out to the floor. And then right as the people were starting to get back into it, Yoko catches the Kid in midair, plants him with a boss man slam, and he gets the 3 count. And the crowd immediately died again. What geeks Bob Holly and the 1-2-3 Kid turned out to be. They get mutilated for 80% of the match, make a 2-second comeback, and then they get pinned flatter than a plate full of piss. I think I'm starting to understand why they turned Waldman heel before not too long. And that was their advertised main event. Just a very plain, boring title match with no life or energy to it. I like Owen and Yoko. Never really had an issue with Holly and the Kid as a tag team. But there was nothing to it. Also, they could pitch to an infomercial immediately afterwards where The Undertaker encouraged people not to drink and drive. Do you ever notice that 50% of these shows are just horribly edited infomercial spots? Why in the world am I watching The Undertaker talk about drinking and driving? The fuck does any of this have to do with the show? I guess they were trying to prevent me from having to stick around to watch Henry O. Godwin versus Rich Myers. Even though that wasn't necessarily the bad part. The bad part was them having the voice actor of Corn-Fed Pig on the phone line doing commentary. For those that never saw Duckman, I guess you won't get the reference. And as you might expect, it very much detracted from what was already a terrible match to begin with. Corn-Fed made some jokes about mud wrestling and being allergic to spandex. I was begging for my life to end the longer the match went. And the Hog Farmer finally won with a slop drop. Not making that finish up, by the way. That was his actual move. The slop drop. A Vince McMahon inspiration if there ever was one. Fucking putrid, dude. It is astonishing to think this show is this bad every week. Just when I think, can't possibly get any worse. They always manage to outdo themselves. A card filled with nothing but clowns. And Doink was only part of the problem this week. Think about that. On one show, we had a garbage man, a fake pirate, a clown, a race car driver, and a hog farmer. All booked in a 45-minute window. The only thing missing was the partridge in a pear tree. And sadly, Coco Ware wasn't around during this point. So the Birdman couldn't be part of the carnival posse. How the fuck did this company win out? All that money they were losing around this period. And they still managed to outlast WCW. Someone ought to write a book. The wrestling show with the garbage man, the pirate, and the hog farmer still got the better of World Championship Wrestling. Okay, so I lied. I did watch a few segments from SmackDown this week. Wasn't much. But they did give me a couple things of note to talk about. Still not sold that I'll be on the bandwagon every week. But I'm at least willing to give them a shot and see where some of the new stuff goes. Where they went with the Bloodline this week was not where I was expecting them to go. They threw an interesting little curveball at me. And I'm willing to see it out. But before we talk about all that, let's go over a few other bullet points from this week. They opened with the new Universal Heavyweight Champion Cody Rhodes, or Universal WWE Champion, or just WWE Champion. Is it sad that I still don't even really know what the official title is for this belt? Swear to God, it's changed like 6 times throughout the last 3 years. No, anyway, Cody came out. And as expected, they're milking this moment for all it's worth. The one time where I might actually make the argument that the "You Deserve It" chant actually makes rational sense. And he's going over some leftover notes from Monday night. Apparently there was a confrontation with him and The Rock that people considered awkward. And that's the word that Cody actually used here. I don't think he meant it in the context of the physical altercation. I didn't watch that segment, so I'm not entirely sure what the people were referencing. I did hear there was a moment where Cody and Rock had traded belts, because Rock still had that modified version of the old Brahma Bull WWF title. So they took like 5 minutes to hand off their belts to each other, and the audience chanted, "This is awkward," which sounds pretty funny. But the bigger news to come out of this was Rock handing Cody something else, which the camera never actually captured. Rock sort of placed it in Cody's palm and then hid it from plain view. So we don't really know what that was. Only Rock and Cody know. And then Rock told Cody that he was leaving for Hollywood again, but he will be back, and he's coming straight for Cody when he returns. No mention of Roman. No mention of anybody in the Bloodline, from what I gather. Roman was not even part of the equation. He may as well have been a ghost at this point. I don't know when we're going to hear from him again, but it'll be real interesting to see what happens when he comes back. So then Cody turned his attention to the Backlash special and started plugging the qualifiers for later on, all to figure out who his opponent was going to be in his first title defense. As expected, the selection was not remarkable. I will very briefly touch on that in a bit. But, overall, it was a fine little promo segment. Cody kind of loses me sometimes when he tries to get all wordy and preachy. It's got that WWE fingerprint where it just sounds too, I don't know, is stagey the right word to use? Scripted is a little too vague. It's not even really that. It's just, sometimes the way he delivers stuff, it doesn't sound like the way normal human beings communicate. It's too grandstanding. But whatever. It was 6 minutes. Got the point across. No complaints about it. It's nice to finally have a fresh babyface champion on top. And the people are still with him by and large. There's always going to be that handful of hecklers that try to boo him no matter what. But again, they have something fresh to work with, and I'm on board with that. So I mentioned the qualifiers a minute ago. Here's how they booked the qualifiers to determine Cody's opponent for Backlash. They did 2 triple threats throughout the night. One of them was Santos Escobar, Bobby Lashley, and LA Knight. And the other was Rey Mysterio, Kevin Owens, and AJ Styles. After we literally just saw a triple threat on WrestleMania not 1 week prior, now we turn around on television the following Friday and we get 2 of these motherfuckers on one show. So as you'd expect, I just went ahead and skipped to the finishes for both of these. LA Knight won the first qualifier. No shocker there. And skipping ahead to the main event, AJ won the second qualifier. I actually caught the tail end of that finish too, and it looked moderately impressive. AJ giving Rey the Styles Clash off the middle rope onto Kevin Owens, who was flat on his back. That was innovative. And that sets up Knight and Styles in their WrestleMania rematch next week. I have to presume AJ's going to find a way to pull one over on Knight there. Logically, I think it makes the most sense to go with Cody and AJ for the Backlash title program. I don't think you'll want to run the risk of doing face versus face this early on. Especially if that puts Cody in a situation where the fans are going to have to pick Knight as the favorite. So I've got to imagine AJ's going to win next week. And that should be good. I don't have any qualms with Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles. There's a little bit of history there. Short-term title program to give Cody a win and keep him preoccupied before SummerSlam. So I'm good with all that. Elsewhere on the show, Braun Breaker beat the shit out of Cameron Grimes and nearly broke him in half with a spear. It was cool. Damn shame this is what they're doing with Cameron Grimes. Serving him up as job fodder. I guess they're not doing anything else with him. So it didn't bother me as much as it probably should have. I do think they need to keep having Breaker rack up some short squash wins for a while. They need to be a little more consistent with it, though. Because I don't think we've seen Breaker have a match on TV in a while. So hopefully they get him on the show more frequently. There was a segment with Bayley where she came out and tried to do the rah-rah speech. And that was all fine and dandy. But then she got interrupted by Tiffany Stratton, and I kind of tuned the rest of that segment out. I think there was a match with her and Naomi. I presume Tiffany won that. And likewise, there was another girls' match like 5 minutes later with Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair versus Piper Niven and Chelsea Green, which was the fucking irony of all ironies. Let's book Jade in a TV match against an opponent with the last name Green. What a rib. And presuming Jade and Bianca won that, we'll just pray to God that Jade's involvement was short and concise. It's so patently obvious where that's all going. We know Jade's going to eventually fuck Bianca. In the figurative sense, for all you sick perverts out there. But, come on. I wasn't born yesterday. Been watching wrestling for 30-something years, give or take. I can smell a makeshift tag team when I see one. I guess they're going to strategically keep Jade in tag matches until that point. Might not be a bad decision. But that was everything pertaining to the title picture and or the rest of the show. The other major thing of note was everything involving the Bloodline. Specifically when it comes to Solo, Jimmy, and Paulie. Now, they teased something earlier in the night when Solo got pissed off that Cody had stolen the Bloodline's locker room. When Paul was trying to calm him down and tell him that if they want their home turf back, they need to repossess the Universal Championship, as per orders from the tribal chief. They were doing such a blatant job of filming Solo's reactions the whole time. You could clearly tell he had something in his back pocket. So when we go to the ring later on and Paul's going over the timeline between WrestleMania 39 and 40, talking about how 39 was an entirely different animal because Roman went into that match with everything under control, and it was Cody who was at fault when he took his eye off the ball for 1 second and let Solo Sikoa get the better of him. WrestleMania 40 was where the script had flipped the other way. And he actually did a really good job tying up the loose ends with the Seth Rollins story, saying that Roman's been waiting for 10 years to get his revenge on Seth for turning on the Shield. 10 years later, Roman was the one that took his eye off the ball. And instead of going after Cody with the chair, he went after Seth instead. And it was the ultimate difference maker. Roman was so consumed with rage over what Seth did 10 years ago, he forgot about Cody in the bigger picture. And that part was great. I probably didn't do a good enough job talking about that and putting over that element of the story, just because I hated so much of everything involved in that match with all the smoke and mirrors bullshit. Remove all the crap with Taker and Rock and Cena. Just do that one angle with Seth at the very end of the match. That would have been awesome. Instead, they had to dress it up with all the other hot garbage, and it detracted from the overall match. I don't care what people say. I still hated that match. Love the end result. Hated the fucking match. But, well, basically, here's what happened. While Paul's trying to insinuate that Roman will be back to take the title again, Solo steps up here and basically cuts a promo himself, tells Paul that wins and losses should matter, and losses should come with consequences, which directs the attention over to Brother Jimmy, who sees Solo go in for the hug, says that he loves him, And right as Solo turns his back, a hooded man hits the ring and blindsides Jimmy from behind. And who should it be but Tama Tonga of New Japan fame, the nephew of Haku. And I obviously recognized him when I first saw him here. I don't know if I can say the same for the majority of the audience. Some people recognized him immediately. There was a very small subset of the audience that tried to start a holy shit chant. The rest of them, not so much. Which is totally understandable. I would not expect the modern WWE audience to be attuned to what's going on in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Quite frankly, I don't even think a lot of hardcores give a fuck about what's happening in New Japan these days. I mean, that market's sort of a dying enterprise. It's been that way since COVID. But, hey, it's a good signing. The familial ties are a great way to interconnect with the bloodline. I think most people presume Jacob Fatu would have been the next logical step in all this. But I certainly won't poon the idea of bringing Tama Tonga in. The kill Jimmy here. Probably one of my favorite things I've seen from Paul Heyman all year. Total slimeball that he is. After Tonga and Solo lay him out with a spike, you see Paulie cowering in the corner. Solo goes over to calmly pull him over to the middle of the ring so they can salute everybody with the one sign. Paulie doesn't miss a beat. He immediately throws Jimmy under the bus and goes along with the big scary men because he does not want to die. Fucking awesome. Paulie's so great. So glad they inducted that guy into the Hall of Fame. He's earned it. But there's more. Because right as he tries to call Roman, Solo immediately knocks the phone out of his hand and he stomps it into oblivion. All these years later, they finally killed off Heyman's cell phone gimmick. And now Solo's running the ship here. At least as long as Roman's out of the picture. And they drag Jimmy into the corner. Solo put the chair around his neck, charged at him to hit the running hip attack. And, well, there's a couple different ways they can go with this. I think the obvious thing that stands out immediately is bringing back Jay to team up with Jimmy to go after Solo and Tama. Probably seems like the most logical step. You know, another option is bringing back Roman to have him team with Jimmy, but that doesn't seem as likely. It's, I mean, again, it's not the direction I expected them to go. I mean, it's hard to gauge what the end goal is in all this bloodline stuff. For years, we've been assuming the eventual plan was to get to Solo and Roman in a one-on-one match. But now they're kind of going in the direction of keeping Solo heel, so unless Roman comes back as a babyface later on, maybe? Which then probably gives him some leverage to keep Rock as a heel. Maybe we find out he's the one secretly steering the ship here. Maybe we find out that Rock was the one that signed Tama Tonga, and Rock was the one that encouraged Solo to attack Jimmy and lay him out. He was the master manipulator the whole time. And that way when Roman comes back, they can do Rock and Roman for Mania next year, and the story kind of writes itself from that point. It was Rock using his executive authority to undermine the bloodline. Always knew there was an ulterior motive. Rock is out for the Rock. He doesn't give a fuck about family. That sorry excuse for a human being. I just wrote the whole fucking bloodline story for the next 12 months. You're welcome, WWE. I'll take my check in the mail. But, I mean, I like what they're doing here. It's new. It's different. It's fresh. And that's what this storyline has needed for a very long time. The Bloodline was very stale for a good chunk of last year and even early this year. But this gives them some breathing room to come up with some new ideas and write the next chapter of the story. So we'll see where it goes. But that was your Cliff's Notes outline of SmackDown for the week. Not really missing much outside the Bloodline development. It is good to know they're not halting all that momentum after WrestleMania. You know, they're at least trying to modify it and come up with a new direction to take everything. How long it'll be interesting for, that's another matter entirely. I mean, the problem is when Roman wasn't involved on TV, a lot of those Bloodline segments were very mid most of the time. The one thing I'm not really clear on is whether Tama Tonga can do a promo yet. I mean, if Paul's going to continue to speak for the group, it's probably not an issue right now. But how long are they going to have Solo and Tama beat up people on TV before that gets old? If Solo and Tama versus the Usos is the end goal for Backlash, I mean, okay. It's not a terrible matchup. I don't think the stain from that Jimmy versus Jay match is worn off yet. I mean, I haven't found a single person yet that's had anything remotely positive to say about that match. I mean, putting them back together just like that, I think that's going to require some clever rationale to justify that decision. I mean, if Jay just shows up one week and saves Jimmy from a mass beatdown, and there's like no explanation for why he and Jay are on the same page again, I might take some fall with that. But again, I'll roll the dice and give him a shot to impress me. It probably won't be horrible. Not like Retro Raw horrible. And then there's NXT, which is a whole different level of horrible. Indescribably horrible, in fact. It's like I want to believe I'm watching a completely different program than what's actually taking place on screen. But it's the real deal. The so-called glory period that people were raving was the shit back in the day. It is, well, it's a glory something. A glory hole, perhaps. I don't know. I'm tired. When we talk about that Khali segment later on, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I swear to God, I'm watching these shows. I'm trying to retain as much information as I can. I mean, my notes are only going to be so helpful. Sometimes it's like I'm watching this show in a parallel universe. A match that I'm pretty sure I've already seen somewhere in the ballpark of 9,000 times, with literally the exact same finish. When I saw the opening match this week was Colin Cassidy versus Aiden English, I screamed. I double-checked the date to make sure I wasn't watching the wrong episode. It was not an encore feature. It was not the wrong date. I was not taking crazy pills. They indeed booked Cass versus English for what seemingly has to be their 87th match in the last 3 months. The single worst NXT feud of all time, I've determined. The feud that never dies. It's horrible. I still have no idea why these guys are mad at each other. It's almost comedy at this point. In the story in all this, Cass, the babyface, is a complete schmuck. He is wholly incapable of beating a guy half his size. No matter how many times they go back to the well with this match, he always loses. Yet somehow this is supposed to get him more over, apparently. Even though the announcers spend the entire time fawning over how great Aiden English is, putting over his charisma. And this is truly the segment where I turned on Renee Paquette. I used to be able to handle her in moderation. I now loathe everything about her as a wrestling personality. She's the absolute dirt worst. Like, she's up there with Samantha Irvin in terms of all-time god-awful on-air personalities. You know, at least Renee doesn't sound like she's gargling with rusty fishing knives. Christ almighty, is she a totally inept commentator? Is she still employed by AEW? She's still doing those backstage interviews? My God, is she worthless? I mean, the only reason she's out there right now is because she's got a set of tits. And the male commentators spend the entire time simping for her. It's like, I mean, people probably think I'm exaggerating with this. That's the funny part. I'm not fucking around. I'm dead serious with everything I just mentioned. This is what was happening on the WWE developmental show in 2014. 10 years ago. Almost to the date. And if that wasn't bad enough, then they followed this with a completely pointless interview segment with Tyler Breeze, where the entire premise was Devin giving him the platform to address the fans. And Breeze just noted, "I have nothing to say." And then he left. Riveting. Riveting fucking programming. And that led to this little pre-tape package they put together for Paige's Raw debut. I think it was the night after WrestleMania. She showed up and beat the current Divas champion at the time, AJ Lee. And I think she won the title from her. God, there's a name I haven't uttered in ages. Probably should have kept it that way. But that was during the period where the Raw after Mania was typically one of the hotter programs they did all year. You had all those surprises and big moments to pop the hardcore fans that would mostly be in attendance at WrestleMania the prior night. You know, just kind of ended up being one of those annual traditions. And then somewhere along the way, they kind of lost that mystique. And then the shows just went back to being regular, boring Raws. And looking back, this was probably the biggest career highlight for Paige in WWE. I actually remembered this. I think the only other main roster thing I recall from her offhand is the retirement speech years later. But I think a lot of people presume this was evident at the time. Paige had been in NXT for a while. You know, she was still the champion, but really didn't have much going on in terms of meaningful opponents. I think she sticks around through TakeOver in May, and then, I mean, she's pretty much main roster full-time from then on. But, I mean, it was fine for getting her over and putting her on the map. You know, problem is everything else with her is a complete blur. Because Vince fucked up most of the call-ups. But at least the debut was strong. She made more impact in the business than Oliver Gray did. I say that because he was booked in the next match with Camacho. Still have no fucking clue who Oliver Gray is. He must have been one of those holdovers from the FCW days. They were still milking the remainder of his contract. Actually, hold on a sec. Now I'm curious. I want to see if this Oliver Gray has a wiki page. Let's pull up the Chrome tab here. Oliver Gray. Is it EY or AY? Let's see. Okay. Joel Redman. Huh. Guess that's the same guy, right? I mean, it looks like him to some degree. Says he's still active. Currently working for All Star Wrestling. Oh, wait, here's his NXT section. Let's see here. On September 19, 2012, Petty Fur made his NXT televised debut using the ring name Oliver Gray and lost 2 sparring matches to Cassius Ohno. Let's see. Skipping ahead here. Says in early 2013, Gray began teaming with Adrian Neville, and the two entered a tournament to determine the inaugural NXT Tag Team Champions. Huh. Blah, blah. Some stuff I don't care about. After more than a year off television, Gray returned on the April 10, 2014 episode of NXT and promptly lost his first match back against Camacho on the April 17th episode. On April 30th, 2014, it was reported that Gray had been released by WWE. Well, there you go. Turns out he was a geek after all. And since I just went ahead and spoiled the finish here, that is exactly what happened in this match with Camacho. A guy that's essentially been a jobber himself in NXT. Now that's when you know your career's in jeopardy. When you can't even beat the recurring job guys on this show. So, well, after that worthless segment, we then cut to a Bo Dallas interview in the back, where he informed us that Occupy Bow Street did not go according to plan because the NXT Bow Leavers did not want to do anything unlawful. Cool. Oh, you know, while I'm thinking about it, totally off subject, but just kind of want to throw it out there. That Bray Wyatt documentary on Peacock was truly fascinating. And I say this as somebody that kind of got detached from Bray over the years just because of all the bad booking and really bad creative. You know, I had a lot of qualms with that Uncle Howdy stuff. You might remember some of that if you were watching the channel around the time. But I'll say this. Bo was outstanding in that documentary. I mean, you could really see how much Wyndham Rotunda impacted his life. And definitely go check that out if you have some free time. It's a long freaking documentary, but it's never boring. It's full with a lot of great information. Some really dark moments, some really touching moments. It, in a way, it really kind of showcased just how important Bray was to that locker room. Veterans and young talent alike, men and women. And he had some real demons he was trying to mask. But it demonstrated just how remarkably gifted and talented he was when it came to ideas. I didn't know Bray was a painter and a sketch artist. I mean, that was really cool seeing some of his artwork. And that guy he met in Pittsburgh, where he came up with all the costume ideas, I had no idea that guy was so local to me. It's like 5 minutes into the documentary and they're already showing, you know, camera shots of downtown Pittsburgh. I'm like, what the hell? Did they film this in Pittsburgh? But really interesting stuff. Yeah, you kind of get choked up a little bit at the end there when you hear everybody talking about how much he meant to the company. Man, especially when you got the family members talking about the personal struggles. Man, that stuff hits home, man. It's definitely one of the better documentaries I've seen them do on a wrestler. Great production. Great editing. Yeah. Highly recommend you check it out. So then the Ascension beat 2 more underneath job guys. And then we had Charlotte and Sasha in the back for some acting. and it was grotesquely phony. I just want to share some epic quotes from this scene. Actual phrases that came out of the mouths of both of these women. From Charlotte. "Whoa, Devin. First of all, that's a cute watch. Where'd you get it? Goodwill?" Another bombshell here. "Next week, you and I have a tag match with Emma and a partner of her choice." And yes, she actually used the phrase partner of her choice. More WWE lingo. She also called Emma a, quote, double bubblehead. Fucking putrid. And not even talk about Sasha's facial expressions during all this, where you can tell she's clearly looking at the teleprompter, probably indicating, "Sasha, look mad," or "Sasha, look stern," or "Sasha, roll your eyes." Swear to God, these people are legit robots. Like, you don't think about it so much now because it's a little bit different in terms of the production, but everything about this old micromanaging format with WWE scripted promos, it was... I mean, it was really bad, dude. Really fucking bad. I can't even watch this stuff without wincing. I don't know how these people stayed with the company. I'd have quit after day one of promo class if I came in during this period. There's no life to these skits. They're just cable access. Like, nobody's being developed in any of this. How is anybody supposed to get fucking better at cutting promos when these are their limitations? No wonder nobody can fucking talk on camera anymore. It's because they were subjected to this shit for 10 plus years. But then we come back for the best segment of all time, which also happened to be the worst segment of all time, which is why it was the best. CJ Parker versus the Great Khali. In 2014, Juice Robinson can go on record by saying that he at one point wrestled the Punjabi Nightmare. And he too was incapable of getting anything remotely good out of him. The fucking Undertaker couldn't get anything good out of him. Yet somehow they kept him around all those years. And we also needed to kill some more time with another Greeny Weenie promo beforehand. So CJ did that. Called out the fans for continuing to destroy a planet that Parker is trying to save, saying they're all ungrateful pricks. I like how only in Vince's world, the planet activist is the heel. And the only reason he's a heel to the fans is that the gimmick fucking sucks and nobody actually buys anything the guy says or does. It's remarkable. But it gets the right reaction. So, well, Khali, in fact, wrestled. I have not seen a Great Khali match in a very long time. Upon further reflection, he's just as horrible as I remember him being. Anything I've ever said about awful, big, lumbering, immobile guys in this sport, I rescind every single one of those comments. King Kong Bundy in 1995 was the fucking Dynamite Kid compared to Khali. Sid Vicious with a broken leg could move faster than Khali. And one of my more favorite chants I've heard from the NXT crowd as of late, during the Heat portion, they all started a global warming chant. I laughed. The Heat lasted for approximately 6 seconds, and then Khali grabbed Parker by the neck. He planted him with a two-handed chokeslam. A tree slam, I think I've heard it referred to in the past. And that was it. Horrendous. -4 stars. Almost -5. But it wasn't in the Tokyo Dome. And that took us to Jason Jordan and Ty Dillinger versus Sawyer Fulton and Baron Corbin. I just kind of realized how fucking stupid all these ring names were. They booked a match where 3 out of the 4 guys' last names were Jordan, Fulton, and Corbin. Jordan, Fulton, and Corbin. Sounds like a law firm. How in the world they ever thought these names would get over is beyond me. But this was WWE in 2014. You just take 2 completely generic first names and last names, and you pair them together. And they only got dumber over the years. Because they're still doing it. I mean, now you got people in NXT with names like Vertigo Formaldehyde and, I don't know, Westcott Dick in Hand. They're all fucking retarded. You know, at least Jordan and Dillinger were trying to come up with matching gear here. I have no idea how long this makeshift duo lasts. I know they eventually have Jordan team up with Chad Gable whenever he shows up. But, you know, I guess they're temporarily going to run with these guys as a young, middle-of-the-card babyface team. Hey, you know, it's something. The Ascension have needed challengers for God knows how long. You know what? Fine. Take a pair of good young athletes, give them some matching trunks, see if they get over. Can't fault them for that. And they did some good stuff together. Their double-team offense looked good. They showed some fire. They were getting the crowd into it. Corbin and Fulton were a decent set of heel goons to get over on him for a little bit. Now, obviously, I remember Baron Corbin very well. Now, he actually broke out a little bit later on and became a star in his own right. I do not remember much about Sawyer Fulton, however. Don't ever remember what happened to that guy. But they had a simple formula here. Flurry of babyface offense at the beginning. Corbin cut off Spears with a lariat. I just realized I've subconsciously called him Spears. I meant Dillinger. But the heels took turns working him over. And then Jordan made a big fiery comeback. Ran wild on Corbin. Then he and Dillinger hit an over-the-shoulder DDT combo and got the pin. I'm not going to say anything negative about it. Even though I'm pretty sure it doesn't really go anywhere. Maybe beyond them doing a job for the Ascension at a later date. But for what it was fine. And no complaints. And they weren't the Rock and Roll Express or the Fantastics. But it is the closest thing we've seen to a young set of up-and-coming babyface tag teams. They both look good. They had that youthful, clean-shaven look. Good pick. Again, I know Gable doesn't come around for a little bit, but they were trying things out. You have to admire the effort. That's what developmental systems are all about. Trial and error. If it doesn't work, you move on to something else. And then we got our main event. For the NXT Championship, Adrian Neville defends against Brodus Clay. And they have somehow managed to make Brodus Clay my favorite guy on this show. Just after a handful of badass heel promos. And no sooner should I say that. Now they turned around and beat him in the end. Via count-out. But he still lost. It didn't get a ton of time. They basically had Clay work over Neville for a while. They referenced Clay being the bodyguard of Snoop Dogg at one point, which may in fact be true. I don't really know. Not denying that's the case. He was somebody's bodyguard at one point, wasn't he? I thought that's how they kind of brought him into WWE. Then they repackaged him later on. But after Neville fired back, he went up and hit a phenomenal forearm, missed a 450 attempt, which eventually let the fight spill out to the floor. And then Brodus went for a diving splash off the ring steps, but Neville rolled out of the way. They methodically tried to keep the camera off of both guys because you could tell Brodus came down and landed on his knees to cushion the landing a little bit, but they didn't want to show it. And then Neville beat the 10 count. So it was a survival victory as opposed to a definitive one. And I guess that'll set up a rematch, at which point I presume Neville will get the clean win back. What they did here together was okay. Did not leave a lasting impact. Can't really say people were clamoring to see a rematch after the 8 minutes they gave us here. But, again, you have to keep in mind, this is all buffer material to keep Neville occupied until May. Nobody ever thought Brodus Clay was winning the NXT title. But as a way to kill time until TakeOver, it served a purpose. The match was kind of uneventful. Kind of like most of Tyrus's matches. I'll credit them for going out strong, but by and large, this show was a hit-and-miss show. A lot of squash material. A lot of names that sort of fell through the cracks over the years. Some really bad promo skits. Kind of the same stuff we've been covering for a while. I mean, they really only got like 1 or 2 central feuds going on right now. I'm surprised how little actually happens in these 60-minute taping blocks. You know, sometimes it's like I'm watching a previous episode on replay. Big Cass versus Aiden English. Seen it. The Ascension squashing 2 job guys. Seen it. The bad promo skits with the girls. Seen it. It's like I'm constantly checking to make sure I didn't actually watch the wrong show. Creatively, it's just a lot of the same old stuff they're retreading. It's hard to be engaged with a lot of it just because you've seen so much of the same formula by now. And again, I know it picks up later on, but the grind, man, the grind. It really does a number on you. But as we round out things for this one, this will not be a 3-hour extravaganza. So you can count your blessings for that one. But we will be back this coming Friday for more continuation of the Classic Review series. And I think we're just going to keep this format going for the Monday show. I will continue to watch SmackDown in snippets. If there's something worth talking about in great detail, I'll go out of my way to do it. But do not expect 30-minute long-winded SmackDown rants. Because honestly, it's just really not even worth the energy at this point. The Retro Raws and Retro NXTs are kind of the building blocks of everything here. The SmackDown stuff is just to try to break up the monotony a little bit. Give me a rationale to justify why I'm still watching those premium live specials. But we'll keep the formula going for a while and see how things shape up later on in the year. I don't remember how much longer SmackDown's going to be on the current network, so things will probably change around that point, but I know that doesn't happen until like the fall. So stay tuned. That's what this channel is all about. Modifying, adjusting, and changing things up. Because I'm never satisfied. Who knows? Maybe I'll go back to watching AEW again. I couldn't say that fucker with a straight face. Give it a try. All right. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll catch you soon. Peace out.